you know, you're going to go to university. He says, you're not going to be a doctor. You're not going to be a lawyer. You're not going to be an engineer. Those are the three professions that he recognized, you know. He says, you're going to play for funerals. You're going to play for weddings. You're going to play parades. You're going to make a living. You're going to support a family that way. That was the kind of thinking, you know. I said, no. And, you know, many years later, when I had the Cass Technical High School band, and he came to my first concert, he's up there in the balcony with Mom, you know, and I went up after the concert, you know, in the balcony. I said, did you like that? He said, was that you down there on the stage that directed that band that sounded so fine? And he was crying, you know. And later on, I did an opera with the Michigan Opera Company. I did several operas with him. And he came to the opera, and it was La Traviata. And after the performance, he says, oh, that poor lady, she died. You know, she dies, but she sings a big aria. But, you know, it moved him. It was the first time he'd ever seen an opera, first time he'd ever been to a concert, you know. But then there was grade school. Grade school and junior high were wonderful. You know, I still think of my fourth grade teacher, who was such a great influence on me. She must have spotted something. She thought I had something on the ball. And she pushed me, she encouraged me. That became my Aunt Minx. Her name was Rutala, a Finnish lady, a beautiful Finnish lady. I think I first fell in love in the fourth grade. When I saw that fourth grade teacher of mine, this beautiful blonde. Anyway, I've kept track of Mrs. Rutila. I still call her Aunt Minx. She's 95 years old now. Last time I saw her was a year ago. She was that important to me. It was the first time that I ever sat at a dinner table when she had me and my little girlfriend come over to her house to have dinner with she and her husband, you know. It was the first time I sat at a table where there were all kinds of cutlery, because at home, we just had a bowl. There was nothing fancy. And if it was something that you needed a fork for, there was a fork there. Rarely had a knife. And if it was soup, you just had a soup spoon, you know. So the first time I sat down at a table where there was proper cutlery and a napkin was in Mrs. Rutila's house, you know. And she was a great influence, knocking off the rough edges and things culturally that I didn't know from home. My folks were very clean people. They were very, but we didn't have much. We didn't have many of the finer things. But I could go into my teacher's house and see the kind of furniture she had and see the way she set the table. I learned so much in this way. And then there was my first music teacher. At 7:30 in the morning, I used to go down to Salina School to hear Mr. Godfrey, who, by the way, was an Ohioan, you know, from Mingo Junction. And, you know, he used to talk to us in band. He said, I'm from Ohio. That's the way he pronounced it, Ohio. Ohio. I'm from Ohio. I'm from a beautiful town called Mingo Junction. Many years later, one of my Ohio friends at a convention, I said, hey, where is Mingo Junction? I said, my band director in junior high school used to talk about the beautiful Mingo Junction. He says, "Oh, that's a dump." you guys wouldn't know that. It's not a very, but to him it was heaven, you know. And every morning he played the cornet, and he played it very well. But that was his warm-up, you know, the last rose of summer. And he also played the cello. And once in a while, I'd hear him playing something else by an Irish composer, because he was Irish, very much Irish, you know. And he'd be playing the cello, and he played the cello very well. But as a teacher, we thought he was the greatest, you know. He's a very impressive looking guy, and he looked like he was 65 years old to a young kid. You know, everyone looks old, but he couldn't have been. He must have been about 50, but he was gray-haired and a very impressive looking man. And we started out with the Emil Asher Beginner's Band Book. It was March size, and I remember that damn first exercise in there to this day. Da, 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 da. We played that darn exercise for weeks, you know? And then he'd get on a philosophy kick, you know. He'd tell us about the election, and he'd tell us about philosophy, and he'd tell us about character and morality. You know, today we're going to talk about character, as the Texans say. But we worshiped them. It wasn't until much later I thought, what did I learn from Mr. Godfrey? You know, when I started, he says, what do you want to play? I said, cornet. I want to play cornet like you. And he said, well, come back next week. When I went back next week, he had one of those shepherd's crook cornets. You know, I wish I had a blackboard. I could draw one for you. You know, the ones about that yay long, and with the shepherd's crook here. And the valve caps weren't matched. You know, he had taken valve caps, and it was a silver horn, but silver horn that was very black in color. You know, it got dirty, and no one had bothered to wash it or clean it. And he says, "Here, Harry," he says, "and here's a fingering chart." He says, "Learn those fingerings." And that was it. And so, but that's a kind of an introduction I got to playing a horn. I had to take that horn home and put a hose on it. And, oh, the slime that came out. Jeez, I can still remember that. My mother says, "You're going to play that thing? You know, you'll get lung disease." Anyway, but that was my first music teacher, and we just worshiped the guy.